What if the biggest factor impacting your health, performance, and leadership wasn't what you eat, but the bloop, see, I told you. I told
Yeah.
you I was going to do it. All right, let's start again. What if the biggest factor impacting your health, performance, and leadership wasn't what you eat, but the decisions you make before you eat? Welcome to the Practice Pulse, where we break down how forward thinking leaders are building smarter systems, scaling intentionally, and creating real impact in their industries. I'm your host, Nancy Margrit, founder of Optima Pro AI, where we help healthcare and wellness businesses scale smarter using practical AI systems, operational infrastructure, and automation while retaining the human touch. Today's conversation is a really interesting one because we're bridging two worlds that don't always get connected in the right way: behavior, leadership, and health. I'm joined by Evan Mestman, a leadership coach, registered dietitian, and the creator of Moment, an app designed to help people build intentional decision making through simple, structured pauses, and brings over 30 years of experience across nutrition, chronic illness, and behavior change. And even Evan brings over 30 years of experience across nutrition, chronic illness, and behavior change. And what makes his approach different is that he's not just focused on outcomes, he's focused on how people think and decide. And right now, with everything happening in health, wellness, and AI, this conversation could not be more relevant. Evan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm grateful for you asking me to be here.
Awesome. A lot of people approach health from the outside in: diet plans, workouts, supplements. But what you're describing is something much deeper. Can you walk us through your origin story from your own experience as a kid and then building into this philosophy around decision making and leadership?
Sure. I spent 30 years coaching high performers, leaders, physicians, founders, parents, smart people, capable people. And the same pattern kept showing up. So they all knew what to do. They just couldn't trust themselves to do it in the moment that mattered. So although I spent years learning nutrition, I have a master's in clinical nutrition. I'm a registered dietitian, diabetes educator, nutrition support. I learned it all, a personal trainer. I stopped teaching information and I started teaching the pause. And that's what Pro Attitudes became. And that's also how I developed Moment.
Awesome. That's great. What really stands out to me is that there's a shift from kind of external tactics into internal awareness and taking that real pause and that moment. And that's often where people, I think, get stuck because they don't stop to think, and it's kind of like your lizard brain is taking over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is, when I first started in private practice many years ago, I learned so much information that I had the problem that a lot of nutritionists had, dietitians, is that we'd show up and throw up. We'd say everything. We want to teach everybody everything. Problem is that they didn't need to be taught information. It wasn't about information. It was about the clarity and pausing at that stop. It wasn't about discipline. It wasn't about, because everybody knows what to do. The
Hmm.
problem is they don't trust themselves at that moment to make the choice. So when I finally slowed down myself and said, listen, this is not really helping people. And I learned how to create a space in my coaching, in my working with my clients. I realized that I was on to something that is the root cause. It's not, I think that the eating is the symptom, the drinking is a symptom, the
Hmm.
overweight is a symptom. The diseases are the symptom of the underlying issue, that we don't take the time to look at those moments. Our self-awareness is not there. And that's what I worked on, is developing first the self-awareness. Let's be a fly on the wall. Let's learn how to watch. What are you doing? Why are you doing those things? Not with judgment, but look at it through that lens of curiosity. And then all of a sudden, you could see the possibilities. You go, well, that doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, that if you have an issue, you kind of have your blind spots. But if you said, well, a friend has the same issue, you'd know exactly how to fix it. And it's the same kind of approach. And I made it simple and built it into an AI tool that anybody can use. It's a 90-second. Where the real gap is that 90 seconds between impulse and what your behavior is, your action. And that's really where leadership lives, is in that moment.
That's an awesome explanation because you really did go in and identify a gap in the market where you kind of realized that traditional nutrition and wellness approaches weren't enough. They weren't, you can provide so much education and you can have so much understanding, but if you don't understand what's motivating you and then also what you can implement to change your behavior, you can't really meet those outcomes. So I love that you're bridging that gap in wellness that so many people struggle with. Yeah, it's more about like, let's make the system work from a mental health perspective to get those.
Absolutely. And part of the challenge is everything's about compliance. You follow this, you do this. And when you go to a doctor or a nutritionist or any clinician, it's looking at what happens before and you tell them, follow this, or you're looking at the after. Well, here are the consequences of what you've been doing. But what about at that moment of choice? And that really, Viktor Frankl said it best: between stimulus and response, there's that space. And what I realized, wait a second, when you have a habit's automatic. There is no space. So we have to figure out how do you pry apart? I call it the psychological knot. It's a knot. People can't change so easily. It's not easy. And what I worked on is these intertwining what I would call neural pathways that have keeping you locked in repeating the same thing over and over again. We needed to get to unlocking that. And that's where these 10 fingers, I represent the 10 inner critics. That's it's the self-defeating, self-limiting software programs that have you been programmed into your brain when you were younger, and they don't serve you anymore, but yet nobody's told you that. So you keep doing the same thing over and over again. And when I got to doing that work, behavior modification, cognitive restructuring, internal family systems, wow, amazing things start to happen with my clients.
That's awesome. Tell us, so where do these 10 inner critics, what does this come from? Is this in one of the books you wrote or?
Well, it came from the work that I've done.
Okay.
I've always defined it as the inner critic because I used to have a very powerful, strong inner critic in my head. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm just not enough. It has to be perfect. You hear the voice in your head, and self awareness says that's a voice. Then you get a feeling associated with that voice. That's a feeling that's associated with the human part of us, part of our brain that is not who we truly are. So when I learned to distinguish between the voices and the feelings and who I truly was, I'm the observer. I'm the witness to those thoughts and feelings. That's when things really started to change because you don't have to listen to those thoughts and feelings, especially when they're negative. And
Mhm.
by default, they're negative because the inner critics were designed to protect us. We are here on this earth to procreate. First thing is to survive and then procreate. So having those inner critics being part of our nervous system, this fight or flight response, which is how our nervous system's designed, the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, can't actually be on at the same time. Parasympathetic is the rest, digest, the power state, but the fight or flight is the primal. You can't lead if you true as a leader. When I love working with leaders, you cannot lead through the inner critic lens and not get into burnout. So when I understood that, that's when I realized I've got the root cause here. It's not all the things that are happening. It's what's driving all this behavior. So those inner critics, what I did is I designed them based on where are they coming from? Are they coming from acceptance? Are they coming from reliance or self-reliance? Where is the deficit that occurred as a child? Because every person creates these identities. Everybody has inner critics regardless. There's
Mhm.
nobody out there without them. Why? Because it's just a definition of the identities that we created to protect ourselves. And if we can look at those identities and understand, kind of like a computer program that is outdated, the hardware is still the same, but we need to update the software. Well, I think that approach really, my clients love that approach because it works out to be easier when you take its power away and you start looking at it through this lens and they start taking all that energy that they had feeding these inner critics and starting feeding the other part, the part that's you, the inner coach.
Mm,
I mean, part of it is you said you wanted to understand what is an inner critic. It's just the voices that you hear in your head that come from the neural pathways that were created when you were younger for survival. They just don't serve you anymore.
mhm. No, I think the strategy you're taking is amazing. Incorporating some NLP, some neuro linguistic programming, and really doing that kind of dissociative method so that you're able to really look at yourself through a third person lens and dissociate from the inner critic is a very powerful tool. So I love that you're tapping into that. Tell us a little bit about who the ideal person is that you're helping today and what specific problem they're trying to solve that other solutions aren't addressing.
Well, the person that I love working with, because I spent 20 years in corporate America and I was in sales management and then leadership, is the leaders that are out there. The people who are really put together and strong, but on the inside, they're falling apart because they haven't really come to terms with these inner critics. And they haven't learned how to develop the inner coach. Inner critics are not negative per se. They are self defeating, unfortunately. But when you learn to live with them, they're not the enemy, they're your friend. They've been there to protect you all along. When you teach them, well, guess what? This isn't working anymore. Let's take that energy and let's use it to be productive. Let's do it to transform. That's when things happen. And leaders out there are extremely productive, but at what expense? A lot of them will say, they call it imposter syndrome. Like, I don't feel like I deserve to be here. And I had that too, but it wasn't so much imposter syndrome. What I realized, it was my inner critic saying, I have a perfectionist maestro. That's one of the inner critics. And it was created when I was a kid and I had very critical parents. When I was younger, my father, it was his way or the wrong way. So when I would help him do things or he would help me do things, we used to, I'm an artist. I love to draw and paint. He was an
Awesome.
artist. Well, when we were building, let's say, these wonderful gliders that required art, or we were painting, he would take over and he would do it himself because I was messy. My last name is a perfect last name for me, Mestman, Mestman. My father was meticulous. And so I didn't learn how, you know what? I don't have the skill set. So when you don't have the skill set, instead of learning and growing, there's a disconnect from the connection with my father. And when you're left upon it to the decisions yourself, guess what? You blame yourself. Well, there must be something wrong with me. And then the shame feeds the inner critic to say, I need to be perfect at what I do before I get it out there. And I was how would you say, I was victim of that in my life until I realized, hey, this doesn't work. Perfectionist maestros are afraid to ask for help. They don't like reaching out. A lot of leaders have that, especially solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, people who are new founders in business, people who are promoted from sales into management, management to leadership. There is nothing wrong with asking for help, but a perfectionist maestro has a real hard time doing it because it's the only way to do it is you've got to do it yourself. Nobody else can do it
Mhm.
as well as you. And so that's where I target my business owners and leaders because I have that experience working there. And I also led the dietitians on Long Island when it's the largest dietetic association on Long Island with over 600 dietitians. I was president of the Dietetic Association, and it gave me a perspective of what's the root cause of why we can't help people. Why is it that, yes, we can give people some tools and some people can be helped, but the vast majority of people are either overweight or obese right now in the United States. Diabetes is an epidemic.
Mhm.
50% of people either have prediabetes or they have diabetes, and half of them don't even know it. And heart disease is actually increasing. We have over 700,000 people dying from heart disease every year. It should be going down, not up. And the first symptom, do you know what the first symptom for half of those people who are dying from heart disease? Sudden death. they don't get a second chance. And when I learned that, because I did my master's thesis in
Yeah.
cardiovascular disease and rehab, that was what my passion said. I want to give people a second chance. So that's why I target business owners and leaders, especially in burnout. They might be overweight, but that's not the key, but they will lose the weight. They will get better blood sugar control. I love working with people with diabetes, but they also will lead better because you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself.
Hmm. That's awesome. Yes, giving someone a second chance is, it's hard when your first symptom is sudden death. Like, so
You don't get
it's
a second
you
chance. Yeah.
don't. Yeah. So you've got to identify some of these markers ahead of time. So I think this is a great approach you're talking about. Let's break it down a little bit how it actually works because it's not just theory. You've built a system around this. Can
Mhm.
you explain? You touched on it a little bit earlier, the core concept of moment, but explain specifically how the pause works and how that changes behavior when your inner critic jumps in, how you identify those trigger points to kind of break up that habit loop and create this new positive habit.
It's a great question. So I built it on a framework. I said no to complexity. I didn't really want it to be something that was overwhelming and that people had to spend a lot of time. That's why I say you can do it in 90 seconds, even 60 seconds for some people. And the framework is built on the pause. And pause is an acronym. So P stands for what's the pattern? You need to be a fly in the wall and look that the pattern may move from morning to afternoon to evening. A lot of people will say, I am right on point all day until 9 p.m. Well, your energy at 9 a.m. versus 9 p.m. is very different. And being aware that the pattern that's there has nothing to do with who you are, it has to do with being so stuck in that. Having to make so many decisions all day long that you're just fatigued at the end of the day after making 35,000 decisions every day. That's what we do. We make 35,000 decisions a day. So I wanted to be able to say, hey, I wanted this pause. First, understand the pattern, recognize it, name it, and then focus on the pause, focus on the actual break where you take an interrupt that um that you will do. That there are certain pattern interrupts that I will create that could be sensor command exercise, it could be breath work, it could be mindset work, and then it's to choose to do something differently and then execute. Those are the acronyms. That's what pause stands for. But what happens is suddenly when people do this very simple tool, they start to see that it takes its power away, the compulsions that they have to do the things once they become aware of the pattern, once they start pausing. And then we can do the deeper work because it looks for patterns. And then what it does is it will build on that as I'm building right now, moment now. It hasn't launched. I'm working on the MVP. It hasn't launched yet, but right now there's a great tool that you can use that's on my website where it allows you to identify, well, what's happening right before you make that decision that you go, this is not what I chose to do. This is not what I want to do. How many people wake up every day and go, I want to lose weight or I want to take better care of myself. And then the alarm goes off and they hit the snooze button. And then they hit the snooze button again.
Hmm.
Sometimes a third time. I mean, part of that is what's happening there. And that's really where pause comes in. And it's not like I don't get that inclination to say, "Oh, I want to stay in bed." It's that I've learned how through this skill set of not listening to that inner voice that says, just stay in bed, push past that pain that I feel or the discomfort and know that getting out of bed is developing the prefrontal cortex. There's at the mid cingulate, the anterior mid cingulate prefrontal cortex is a part of the brain that the harder something is, the more it develops. And the more it develops, the more can work outside your comfort zone. Does that make sense?
No, that's amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's a little inspirational to those of us who, hit the snooze button to know that, like, by not hitting the snooze button, you're actually building up a part of your brain. It made me think I'm going to have that conversation with my youngest son because he loves brain science stuff, but he definitely struggles with getting out of bed on time.
It's interesting because like Mel Robbins came up with the 5, 4,
5
3, 2,
mhm,
1,
the
right?
5-second rule.
5-second rule. And that was one of the main, probably when she came up with that. I had been working with this, but I
Mhm,
hadn't developed the app yet. But it made sense. I said, she's onto something there and it works, right? But people don't even notice it. It's almost as if those moments that if we don't slow down, we're going so fast that we miss all those moments. And
mhm,
that's really why I built this and why I coach the way I do. My goal for my clients is to have more moments of spontaneous joy.
mhm. I
Think
love that.
about if you can, what is joy, right? It's not happiness, but part of joy is just knowing there are moments in life that are sorrowful and moments that are joyful. But if you don't have the sorrow, which kind of every sorrow kind of builds the cup that fills with joy. You must have adversity in your life to grow. And that's what I also teach my leaders, my clients to do is to understand how to reframe what happens. Because it's not what happens, it's how you handle it and how quickly you recover.
Mhm. Yeah, you really have to have that contrast, and I love the analogy of a cup and being able to fill that with joy, and those joyful moments really are paramount, and we have to take ourselves back there sometimes when we get kind of, at least I do, when I get stuck in kind of a loop. But I love the idea of inserting structured interruption into decision making. It's very powerful, especially in high performance environments. I
Hmm.
myself sometimes, especially after a long week, it's like you go out to dinner on a Friday night, and I'm just like, I just tell the server, "You just pick me something to eat." I'm finished
Right?
making decisions for the day. Just make
It's
sure it has
decision
no
fatigue.
dairy and no wheat, and, like, just whatever, you just pick me something to eat. Like, I
I
can't do it
love it.
anymore. Yeah,
See,
so
it's real, right?
it is.
Everybody can relate to that. When you go out, my wife does this to me all the time. She's like, "Oh, it's restaurant week this week. Go pick a restaurant." I'm like, first of all, I don't I'll eat anywhere. She can't because gluten free, right? She
Yeah.
has all these and I'm like, "You pick it. I'll eat anywhere." No, you've got to choose. That decision fatigue is real. So
Mhm,
all day long, all week long, we're doing this. We're making make a tight fist like this, right?
mhm.
And you hold this fist all day long. Your fingers are going to be numb. What we're looking for at the end of the day is,
Yes.
and what is that? That a lot of times is escape. We need relief. But what if we decided to reframe that and go, I need recovery? That's the reframe. That's a different way of looking at it. And the fastest growth for people comes from subtraction, not addition. It's not about more information. It's about slowing it down and pausing.
Mhm.
And that really is what makes the difference.
That's great. I love the way you put all of that. That's great. So you mentioned helping in our intro call. You mentioned helping people lose weight with their minds, not their mouths. What exactly does that look like in practice?
It's a it's a fun question. So I came up with this idea that if you think about losing weight with your mouth, you just stop eating, right? You close your mouth up, but it's what's driving you to eat. And most diets will tell you what not to put in your mouth, right? But that's the last stop. What about what's driving the decisions 20 minutes earlier? Like it's lunchtime and the decision that you made on the weekend not to prep your meals for the week because you didn't have time, and the decision that you made to not do a deep shop because you didn't have time to do a deep shop because you had all these other things to take care of. You can, you get it, right? It's
Mhm.
everybody has a life to live. In those moments, it's not a good or bad. We're just not paying attention. So when you learn to catch the moment, all of a sudden the food decisions, they get easier. Not because you're restricting, because there's clarity, you're more clear. Oh, what if instead of losing weight, you were letting go of what never was yours to carry? I call it the weight on your shoulders, not the weight around your middle. That's going to come off. But if we get rid of the weight on your shoulders, it really makes a big difference. Remember, the mouth is the last stop. The decision was already made upstream.
And that ties directly into something a lot of people underestimate, that inner dialogue that you were talking about,
Mhm.
the inner critic. So tell me a little bit in terms of the inner critic. How do you help clients identify and tame their inner critic? And then what changes once they start to develop that inner coach instead?
I love working with clients who say they don't have one. I get them to take my inner critic quiz. Now, I have one that's short and sweet because the one that I do with my clients is a long, detailed one. It takes 10, 15 minutes, but I have one that's like 3 minutes. And I have that also available for your listeners.
Awesome.
What you want to do is by answering these questions honestly, what you end up finding out is who the loudest voice is up here. And I call it the spicy meatloaf. And we're not trying to kill the inner critic. It's just, it's been with you a long time and with my clients, and it's fighting makes it louder when you fight with it. Part of it is understanding it. And then it's not about labels, it's not about personalities, it's just about noticing what's driving the moment. Is it that negative ninny in your head? Or is it the part of you that's grounded and calm and curious? The inner critic feeds on this urgency that you must do this or else, right? Or
Sorry. Give me just a
that,
sec. So sorry about that. That's literally never happened. I keep the dogs in here with me because they usually don't bark.
or
So sorry about that. Do you mind just restarting what you were saying?
sure.
You can start just right before where you were and or
Okay.
wherever you're comfortable.
So the inner critic really feeds on urgency. It'll also focus on your fears. It'll focus on avoiding discomfort. So it's escaping. But that inner coach is the one that takes on all of this, like the adversity that happens and goes, wow, fear is the signal. Fear is my fuel. It says I'm working outside my comfort zone. And it'll slow you down and ask you what actually matters right now. So there's the difference. And when at first, when you use the tools that I have, it takes its power away. And when that power is gone, you can start to see more clearly. I like to call it the boil. We live our lives, it's like boiling water. And when you look at the top of the pot when it's boiling, you can't see the bottom. It's just all little. But what happens when you bring the temperature down? Now the water becomes clear.
Mhm.
Clarity, it's really important. Now, it takes a long time for that boil, the temperature to come down. And that's what I work on with my clients to recover as quickly as possible to help them instead of allowing the inner critic to be in charge,
Mm.
to let the CEO be your inner coach. And I always use this simple rule: which voice will you thank tomorrow morning?
Mm.
And that's the one that gets the CEO seat.
Yeah. That's like it's nice when you can put a very specific question to something to help you make like you're talking about decision fatigue to help you make that decision in an instant. It's nice when you can do that so you don't argue with yourself which way or the other. So I love that you put little tools like that together. It sounds like this is going to be a really awesome app when it's fully developed and even in the MVP stage. I'm excited to see it. So let's shift a little bit now into what you've built from an operational standpoint, because turning this into a scalable model is a different challenge entirely. Can you
Hmm.
kind of walk us through what the current app looks like and maybe even where you started with the one-to-one coaching and how that kind of developed into this, what the difference is there, and then how these pieces fit together, and then even maybe a little bit of your long-term vision on where you want the app to go?
So let's unpack that. That's a lot to
Yeah,
unpack.
it is.
So
Sorry.
no, that's great. The app was designed for recurring streams of revenue for me because I wanted to be able to help more people. I was part of a startup back in 2001, September of 2001, Cantor Fitzgerald. We went public on 9/11, right? For this wellness product that was delivered via its internet. That was kind of like a real test for my recovery. That's where I pivoted into corporate America because I had 500,000 founder shares worth zero.
Mhm.
And I went, okay, I learned resilience is a thing. So I've been building this ever since then. But what I wanted to do is to have a recurring stream of revenue. So that I created the app first for my clients, and it was for me even myself too, because it helps them to be more focused. It helps them to do the pattern interrupt, and it helps them to develop their inner coach, because the MVP is about the pause. And then the phase two will be the work for nutrition, for also for exercise, for time management, all of it built in for leaders so they can make better decisions. And it works. It's an AI driven tool. So building this has been a lot of fun. So in my program, though, there are three entry points, just one philosophy. So I have the app moment. That's the front door. That's the intention. 60 to 180 seconds. You got a pause tool, helps people when pressure hits. It's not a lot of money, and it's repetition, high repetition. And then the deeper lane for me is the coaching. So I do one-on-one work with leaders. That's where I love, that's my sweet spot, right? I'm ready to rebuild the way they make decisions at a foundational level. And then I love working in groups though. Group programs,
Hmm.
they sit in between. So now there's a shared language. You've got a tribe of people who are helping and supporting each other, shared practice, community without a dependency. It's all about building agency. So every layer points back to the same idea. How do we restore agency? How do you preserve choice? And how do you build self trust? Because if you don't trust yourself, how are you going to trust what others are doing? And that's where the inner critic needs to really learn how to sit with this and go, I need to learn, the person needs to learn to trust themselves again.
Mm, that's awesome. Yeah, it does. You have to really build that trust within yourself to trust the decisions that you're making, and building in that moment where you stop and reflect and make those decisions in a different headspace is so important. The I love the layered approach too. It's something that you see in scalable businesses. So it's a smart approach.
And the hardest challenge is protecting the product from any of the pressure to grow. So
Hmm.
I call it the spine, the MVP, and then I can build the modules around it. And that way I can scale. And I'm building systems. Very much believe in systems because it's about it's not just discipline, right? It's about how do you stay true to agency and not compliance. And that's been the hardest part of it, but also the most rewarding part because it when I did that, even working with AI, it's the one that shared with me, wow, you have a real lane here because nobody else is doing agency. They're all focusing on compliance. Do this, do that, and you'll be successful. But what if you could make the decisions for yourself? What if you're being supported to make those decisions yourself and building your self leadership, trusting yourself again? And that's really how scale to me is. It's the discipline, right? Right. That's scaling. I have to stay true to it. And it's not just a button that you're pushing, right? Really wanting to help thousands and thousands of people that I can help one on one the way
Hmm.
I can if I launch this and scale it the way I want to.
Yeah, there's a difference when you create that agency in, teaching someone to follow the rules and teaching someone to really think autonomously and intelligently when they're making these decisions. So I love that you're incorporating that. So for other founders that are building something in health or wellness, what's one operational or strategic decision that has made the biggest difference in your growth?
Hmm. Asking for help. I think leaders can't sometimes get out of their own way. Founders may not necessarily be the best CEOs, but that doesn't mean that you can't find people, or they may not be the best at operations, COOs, right? They may not be the best at building. I am a visionary. I am not, and I do not have fun with the details. So I've learned how to delegate to my team. I have a couple of people on my team that I use as independent contractors, and they have made a huge difference in helping me get to where I want to go. Can't do it yourself.
No, you absolutely cannot. And you're building alongside an evolving technology, which adds an additional layer. So as you move kind of from MVP and into launch, what are the biggest challenges that you're navigating right now in scaling this to a larger platform?
Well, it's just that, like I said before, to me, the in scaling, the instinct is you want more features, you want more
Hmm.
content, right? More noise. And I don't want that. I want moment. I always say focus on the signal and let's try to avoid the noise. And if you can keep that at 80% signal, 20% noise, that's my goal. And I would encourage anybody developing an app not to get like, oh, what if I did that? What if it did that? Always stay true to the core of what you're trying to accomplish, and let also, instead of trying to develop everything, let your users dictate, well, what's working, what's not, and so that you can work on making it for them. And if it ever feels like homework, it's wrong. Like, you have to enjoy this. I've also realized there are certain things I didn't want it to be. I didn't want it to sound like therapy. I didn't want it to sound like homework. I didn't want to slow anybody down. Like, oh my gosh, I got to stop and use an app to do this. It was meant to create a pattern interrupt quickly and practice it quickly so that you could say, you get me. And
Mm,
yeah, this makes sense, and then move on. So scaling this, I think that having the pieces of the puzzle as I go along, of building the pieces of the puzzle, knowing when those pieces become necessary and knowing the stages. I've definitely done it in different phases. Being able to define those phases makes a huge difference and has really helped me get to the MVP, which should be done in the next week or two.
that's exciting. That's super exciting. I think as app developers or developers of any technology, you really have to watch out for the feature creep, like you were talking about, because you can become overloaded with trying to add all of these features too quickly. And to your point, really those new features that need to be added, you should be testing with your client base. So getting that MVP out quick and having feedback with people who are actually using the app and then adding features at the right time in the right way to really help your user base is just a very sound business system. So kudos to
And
you. I think that's great.
Thank you for that. Every day, AI is changing. So to
Mhm.
me, as AI changed and I was able to use tools beyond where I'm, using GitHub and Replit and being able to use Claude and learning how to use it at different levels. Now they just launched Claude Design. It wasn't there a couple of days ago, and now they have it. It does really make a difference. When I started to use Claude Max, I was able to simulate, because I'm a visual learner. So I
Mhm.
wanted to simulate, I wanted to do flow charts. It was much more complicated. I don't think I could have done this. Like, I was working on this 25 years ago, 30 years ago with the startup, not
Mhm.
knowing what I wanted. But now to be able to use AI, what it's done is it's shortened the cycle. So instead of something that takes a month, it can literally take a day. And that, I think, is what's so powerful. Also, that can create a major problem unless you're very focused on, well, what's important? What do I need? Don't
Mhm.
have this shiny object syndrome. And one other thing, don't just trust people implicitly. I hired a company for 3 months. I was spinning my wheels because they just assumed one thing. And I'd done a lot of vetting. I'd talked to 5 or 6 different companies, and I was through a referral system and great people. But this company did not do well by me because they missed a big chunk of this that now my AI is doing, like defining, what are the steps? What's the flow? How does that look? Is that representing what I truly want to do? And what are the pitfalls from creating guardrails for, so you're right, and testing to make sure that this is not going to blow up as you scale.
Mhm.
All of that, I always say it's best when you're going the wrong direction. When you get on a train and you're going the wrong direction, it's best to get off at the next stop. It took me 3 stops before I got off, but every time I got off, now things are progressing. So I would encourage people not just to design something and go, because I'm not a programmer, and then give it to somebody. Today, there's enough tools where you'd be surprised you can use it to really say, wow, look at what this can do.
Mhm.
Or before you give it to somebody and spend $5,000 wasting your money, which is what I did, but it wasn't a waste. It was a learning experience. I always look at everything as an opportunity or a gift. So it gave me the opportunity to really look at this differently and do the work that I needed to do to make sure that it was representative of what I wanted for the public.
Great. So looking ahead over the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see the intersection of AI, behavioral health, and personal agency evolving?
Mm,
And what should founders be preparing for now?
wow, that's a great question. And, things are happening so quickly right now. I've talked to a lot of founders who are developing tools for with AI. And what I found is everybody is developing it differently. And what I really learned is behavioral health right now is just faster advice for people when they look at AI. And that's not a solution. They don't need more information. They don't need more text or more nudges or more noise. I think what the real shift's going to happen, and this is what I get excited about, is agency. Like we can have people use AI to feel like they're leading again themselves as well as their teams. That to me, I think is where AI is headed. It's meant to be a partner to people. AI can't think like a human. It's a pattern detector and it's throwing you back what's out there. And it thinks it's smart, but it makes mistakes. I think that you're going to find a real shift when AI learns to do less, not more.
Hmm, I like
That's
that
what I think is
perspective.
going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, awesome. That's an interesting perspective. I like that. Okay, so before we close out, we're going to do our lightning round. So these are quick, short answers, and we'll just
Mm.
roll through these. The first one, it's just 4 questions. The first one is, what's one myth about health and nutrition that you would eliminate forever?
That it's about willpower. Discipline is not the answer. I'm going to say that it's called won't power, not willpower. And that's where clarity is. People don't have a discipline problem, they have a clarity problem. And if they can just say, just this once, I won't, it gives them permission tomorrow. And that provides the clarity they need. I've been doing won't power forever. It's a really easy tool. Just ask yourself, just this once, I won't. So I think that that's a myth out there. Willpower is not what's failing you. Clarity is.
That's great. I love the won't power. That's really cool. Okay, what habit keeps you steady when stakes are high?
I depend on my breath work. Um, People do not understand that breath connects the body, mind, soul, that it is the one thing. It's also physiologically. I use the physiological sigh where you take a deep breath in, then you expand the rib cage with a second sip, and then you just blow out nice long breath. And if they can't do that, they just breathe in and out through the nose where it's a long breath. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. That vagus nerves immediately, it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system to take over. It's giving it a signal to say everything's great. And people don't realize it is amazing. I do it every Wednesday in my LinkedIn event. I take people to meet their inner coach, and it starts with breath work, and they go, wow, the noise quieted. It's just an amazing, simple tool. And that shift is quiet, but it's real.
It's awesome. Love that, and I'm also surprised at how many people have just in recent podcasts have noted breath work as one of their habits that they lean on. So that's great. And I love that you dove into the science a little bit. So, what gives you the most hope right now?
What gives me the most hope is so I love Rumi, who's a poet, a famous
Hmm.
Persian poet that said, when things break, it allows the light in. And I think that ever since COVID and all the disruption that's happened in the world, I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as an opportunity to let the light in because the powers that be that have been trying to control things and manipulate things, everything's up in the air. So to me, the hope is that people have woken up. It's almost like they've taken the red pill in the matrix
Hmm.
and they realize they're weak. They need to learn. Now, we can't download the data, but there's an opportunity here for us to kind of reset,
Hmm.
right? Just like redirect to me. It's really redirect where our energy is and forget about the noise, focus on the signal. So the signal is there's incredible opportunities, especially in the United States, everywhere in the world there is, because this was a global thing that happened and it's a global thing that's happening now. And people think that, my gosh, things are happening And, they look at it as being a victim. I look at it as just look at what you can do. Don't focus on what should happen, focus on what you can do. And there's huge opportunities, and I look at everything as very hopeful right now.
That's
I don't know if
beautiful.
that answers your question,
It
but
does.
that's how.
That was a great answer, and I actually have a little porcelain plaque that's on my wall that's a Rumi quote, so I love that you brought some Rumi into it. Awesome. Last question, where can listeners follow your work and learn more about the moment?
That's important. There are 2
Mhm.
places right now. It's the app. Right now, I have a landing page, yourmoment.ai, no spaces, and that's where you can try eventually. Right now, there's a little interactive tool there, and you can put your email in to say, "I wanna be on the waiting list for when I launch," and I think that's great. And then for me, also, for coaching or my writing, I do my blogs. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on proattitudes.com. You'll find me there as Evan Mestman on LinkedIn, and proattitudes.com is my main website. And I have a blog there where I write. And I think that's important because it's important to build momentum one
Mhm.
moment at a time. And the stuff that I do helps people trust themselves again.
It's awesome, and we'll include links to all of that in the show notes. Evan, I want to thank you. This was such a valuable conversation, especially around the idea that real change doesn't start with action. It starts with awareness and intention. And one of the things that you said earlier that really stood out to me is that you really intentionally designed this app not to stop momentum, but to shift it in the right direction. So making it so that we're not taking all of this time out of our day, but instead being intentional with where we're spending our time to shift the momentum in the correct direction. So thank you so much for being on the show. Really, this is one of my favorite topics, and I love that you're building in this autonomous decision making and habit building in such a positive way for people. I think it's a necessity for everybody, but especially entrepreneurs because of the decision fatigue and just the overall stress. So, really great conversation. Appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome, of course. So, for everyone listening, if you want to connect with Evan or learn more about what he's building, we'll have his links in the show notes. And if you found this episode valuable, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's building, scaling, or rethinking how they approach growth. As always, innovation creates possibility, implementation turns it into growth. We'll see you next time.